Hi, this presentation is about how to start a limited company in Hong Kong. We'll briefly touch on the requirements, the registration process, and also the ongoing compliance itself. So the actual requirements. Hong Kong is a very easy jurisdiction to set up a company, and it can be done very quickly. Some key things to point out. Foreign shareholders. That's not a problem here. Many jurisdictions require you to have a local shareholder, or at least a part shareholding by a local. Hong Kong can have 100% foreign shareholders. It should be noted that their details will be publicly accessible through the company registry, but that only goes up one level. So, for example, if your Hong Kong company is owned by a BVI company, the name of the BVI company will be disclosed, but not the names of the people behind the BVI company. Those details of the ultimate controlling or beneficial owners are held in registers, but those registers are not publicly available. There's very few restrictions on share capital and indeed the number of shares. Essentially, the minimum share capital is $1 Hong Kong for one share, and you can have multiple share classes with various rights associated to them. This enables you to have a structure that can work throughout the life of the company. So, for example, typically with people I work with, we start with a company having a very simple structure of 1 or 100 ordinary shares. Maybe the currency is pounds or US dollars or euros or Hong Kong dollars. Then as they bring staff on or investors, it's very simple to add in preference shares with various rights on them to suit the needs of that fundraising. There is no need for a resident director in Hong Kong. And by that I mean you don't need a Hong Kong person to be one of your directors. This contrasts to Australia and New Zealand and to Singapore, where they all require a local person to be on the board of your directors. Your directors can be from anywhere. You have to have one director, and if you only have one director, that director cannot also be your company secretary. Your company secretary is the person who keeps the statutory registers of the company, and by that I mean the register of directors, the shareholders register, etc. They keep them accurate, and they are responsible for reporting those to the company registry on a prescribed date. That company secretary has to be resident in Hong Kong. It can be a person or it can be a company. There's lots of people who provide this as a service, though some people still in-house it and have one of their employees do it. You have to have a registered address in Hong Kong, and that address cannot be a PO box. There are rules around that it needs to be accessible to the public, but we still see people use their residential address as their registered office, especially in the startup world where maybe this is they're putting a company in place just to test the waters and to see what's what. There are restrictions over the company name, and we'll talk about those next. Whilst in some jurisdictions people reserve the company name, and in fact the Singapore system, for example, there is actually a formal step for reserving the company name. Practically in Hong Kong, you do the name at the same time as you do the registration. So all you need to do is check that it's not already been used or potentially reserved. Other rules around what company name you can use are, obviously, we can't infringe on trademarks. It can't be obscene or vulgar. It's either in English only or it's in Chinese only. There's no mix of English and Chinese. And it cannot be in simplified Chinese. It has to be in traditional Chinese. There's other restrictions around terms, so implying a link to government by words such as Chamber of Commerce or Department or even Government, that's not allowed at all. As are words such as stock exchange, which are restricted and would require approvals of other government departments. As I said, practically, once we've chosen the name, we do the registration of the company almost immediately to guarantee it. Just to point out here, you can also change the name relatively simply. To change the name, you need to have a shareholders meeting and then file a form with the company registry and pay a very nominal fee of 290 Hong Kong dollars, thereabouts. So if you are needing to get the company registered, the name doesn't need to be perfect. You can just register it under a name and then change it very simply and very quickly afterwards. So practically the next step is actually done by your corporate services company. So this will be an organization who will actually set their company up for you and more than likely acts as the company secretary in the future. What they will do is prepare the incorporation form, and that's a standard template from the company registry, the articles of association. They will then obtain the signature for approval of the founder member, basically agreeing to those articles of association. The first director, or in fact any of the initial directors, have to sign a consent to act as director. That has to be filed within 15 days of starting the company, and that has to be signed originally. It cannot be digitally signed unless the director has certain Hong Kong government recognized e-signature powers. Practically, that document is signed physically. And the company secretary has to sign their consent that they're going to act. Now, the articles of association, the company registry very conveniently gives some model articles. These articles cover most cases, and we recommend most of our clients to go with those. And they are easy to change in the future by merely editing them and refiling them. So the actual process of form filling is relatively straightforward, although there is a lot to fill in. Please note that the incorporation form, this is where the shareholders and the officers, such as the director, their residential addresses, etc., their ID numbers, passport numbers, will be written in those documents in order to identify them. Practically, this is the step where your corporate services company is likely to do their Know Your Client procedures, where they'll obtain copies of your passport, validate they're correct, your proof of address, and your source of funds. This is no different from essentially opening a bank account, and so this is all information that you need to have ready and you need to have available. Once that's all done, the company is registered with the company registry. Typically, this is done online, and the online process takes maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours. If it's done in hard copy, it can take upwards of a week, if not 2 weeks. The government fees for this are 1,720 for the incorporation fee in Hong Kong dollars, and currently the business registration fee is 250 Hong Kong dollars, which is currently discounted. The company registry market this as a one-stop shop. So you register your company and you also register with the revenue at the same time to essentially get your business registration. This again makes it incredibly convenient. After about an hour or two, the registry will email the people who set up your company and they'll send the certificate of incorporation. So that will give you your company name and registration number and also the business registration certificate. This means that you can start business immediately. You can sign contracts, you can start negotiating, you can register IP in the name of it. Everything's ready to go. Ongoing compliance. Well, one thing to note that a lot of people forget is that you do need to still tell the revenue when you start business formally, and there's a form for that which your company secretary can do. But things for you as the entrepreneur to consider are, first of all, in Hong Kong, you're free to choose your own year end. You need to prepare accounts within the first 18 months, and you'll receive your first profits tax return from the IRD after 18 months of incorporation, but your actual year end can be anywhere in here. Generally, what we say to clients is to ensure that your first year end is loss making, if you can, because then obviously you won't pay tax in your first year or even 2 years. If the company is not dormant, then you will need to appoint auditors, and those auditors will review the accounts you prepare, and you can also ask them to prepare the tax return and to file that. If the directors change their details, so their passport number changes or their address changes, you need to inform the company registry of that, and that's something for the company secretary to do. As with most jurisdictions, you have to stay up to date on your accounting. And lots of our clients use items such as Xero online to do that. As you get busier, that might be something you choose to outsource, but initially you should just be at least maintaining a spreadsheet of the ins and outs. When you employ staff, you need to consider a few things. One is immigration. Can you legally employ that person? And that's the director's responsibility. And then once they are employed, you need to apply for MPF, which is the mandatory Provident Fund. Essentially, this is a form of social security in Hong Kong, and that kicks in after essentially a month of someone being employed by you. The registration for that is relatively easy, but it's something that you need to do and often will require a wet signature. You also need insurance when you employ someone. There's something called the workers' compensation insurance, and that is to ensure that if they have an accident at work, it will pay for a proportion of their wages. Every year, at the anniversary of the incorporation of the company, you need to file the annual return, and you also need to pay the annual return fee, which is very nominal at 105 Hong Kong dollars, and the business registration with the tax office also needs to be reviewed. That's it. So setting up the company is very straightforward. Practically, if everything's all together, we can get it done easily within a day, and then the company can actually start trading, and you can sign contracts and register your IP, etc. Any questions, as always, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.